We've got Craig Moffett from Sanford Bernstein. He is the only analyst we've been able to find who's got an underperform rating on the shares of Verizon. We've also have Richard Doherty. He is the co-founder of the Envisioneering Group and is an electrophysicist, which means that he should have really no problem explaining the technology aspects of Verizon's new iPhones. And we have Roben Farzad from Bloomberg Businessweek. Bloomberg Businessweek has a big story coming on Verizon and the iPhone this week. The current issue, of course, on the newsstands now. Now, Craig, are we making too much of this, the fact that AT&T is no longer going to have the exclusive right to sell the iPhone? I think Bloomberg News broke this story back in 2010. Everyone kind of waited to see whether it was really going to happen. All right, so it's going to happen. Is this a big deal?
Well, I think you put your finger on it exactly right. I actually was on vacation in March of 2010 when I got a call from a reporter at the Wall Street Journal saying, we're breaking the story tomorrow morning that Verizon is getting the iPhone. So to say that this is already old news is an understatement, right? This has been fully anticipated by the market now for something like 10 months.
I think the technical term is baked into the stock.
Baked into the stock. And so, the real question is not whether or not this is a big deal. Of course it's a big deal. The real question is whether or not there's still more juice here left in the stocks. And our impression was around the end of last year, in November of last year, that the stock looked pretty fully valued then, and that it was time to start to underweight the shares of Verizon because it was already looked like it was in the stock.
Roben Farzad, are we just getting caught up in a fad here?
Actually, I want the Verizon iPhone to unite the Koreas and solve global warming and do all these things that just AT&T hasn't been able to do.
There's got to be an app for that, right? An application that you can download to your iPhone that'll do that, right?
Indeed. But look, for all the complaining that's been out there about AT&T's network, for Verizon, there's almost an example here of maybe you have to be careful what you wish for. If the iHogs, as Craig put it in the past, migrate to that network en masse and suddenly they start treating it in terms of all-you-can-eat fashion. Is Verizon really planning for this? Does it really know what type of pricing hit it's going to take over the long run if all-you-can-eat becomes the industry standard?
All right, well, let's bring in Rick Doherty and find out what aspect of the technology situation is important, because they're two different technologies in terms of the networks, right? You've got AT&T, yes, and that, along with T-Mobile, that uses the GSM network. That's what they use in many parts outside the United States, particularly in Europe. But the CDMA technology, that's what Verizon has, and that's what the new iPhone has as well.
Yes, and that's a Qualcomm technology, and that's the big differentiator between the two phones, because you'll probably be able to make much easier voice calls right now on the iPhone, but the data usage that people got used to on AT&T, that'll be different.
All right. Craig Moffett, what about the competition? I can't imagine that AT&T, as well as Sprint, or maybe even T-Mobile, they're just going to all sit idly by and say, great, you guys all want to buy the iPhone? Sure, go to Verizon and do it.
You're exactly right. I mean, that's the part of this that I think is the most important to focus on. It's not just about how many customers Verizon's going to get. It's what's AT&T going to do in response. Because if AT&T has to either lower its prices or simply increase the subsidies on other handsets to stay in the game, then the collateral damage is going to be felt by Sprint and by T-Mobile. And that's the real question for the market is what does this do to destabilize whatever kind of equilibrium we've had in the market up to now?
Julie Hyman, I got to imagine that Steve Jobs is loving all this, because whether AT&T or Verizon or T-Mobile or Sprint, whether they come out with any kind of strategy, he just sells more iPhones.
He seems to. And what struck me today is that Steve Jobs, of course, didn't do the presentation, but Tim Cook, who's one of his lieutenants, did, and was very Steve Jobs-ish, I thought, sort of in his body language. He paced back and forth across the stage, the way he used his hands. But I wanted to ask Rick Doherty, actually, when you had this Verizon version of the iPhone, I mean, did it need to be a little more interesting here? I mean, it doesn't differ significantly from the AT&T version, where there are a couple of differences, but did you expect maybe a little bit more innovation in this particular version?
Well, clearly, everybody was expecting some news about 4G, but this is a 3G. This is a Verizon CDMA phone. And Steve Jobs, of course, is busy working on iPhone 5, which may have those capabilities.
So, Rick Doherty, if you take a look at the technology that currently exists, is there any reason on a technology basis to go out and buy a Verizon iPhone? Is the network better? I mean, people have talked about dropped calls on the AT&T network.
I've had to make phone calls on my AT&T phone by using a Verizon MiFi device, where AT&T said that I had 5 bars. So clearly there's going to be an exodus over to Verizon just for voice quality alone, and a lot of iPhone customers carry a second phone with them just to make sure they get their voice calls through. But we'll see in the first few weeks how the Verizon network can handle all this new traffic that AT&T is used to over 3 years.
Oh, Craig Moffett, could I ask you this? I mean, look, the FCC seemed to have teed this up for Verizon. It's like, you know, we let AT&T get away with having this phone exclusively with Apple for the better part of 4 years, and now it's a huge pent-up marketing event. Why can't we just have it so that you could have any phone on any network like so many other countries have?
Well, the argument that was made, you're right, that was a big issue at the FCC about a year and a half ago, I want to say, when they were talking about should they ban exclusives. And the argument that was made in response, and I think it gained some traction, was the argument that, well, look, exclusives allowed AT&T to make a big bet on the iPhone when it wasn't clear that the iPhone was going to be a big deal. And they helped subsidize the development of the iPhone, and the fact that it turned into a home run that everybody wanted was obvious in retrospect. But there were an awful lot of analysts out there who were saying, you know, this is Apple is now playing outside of its sandbox, and it's not going to be a success, and they're never going to be able to upset the BlackBerry juggernaut, and on and on and on and on. And to their credit, AT&T put their money where their mouth is and said, we're willing to make a big bet in subsidizing this product, in marketing this product, and it was only after it became a home run that everybody said, well, it's crazy that it's exclusive. Sure. But there were things that were clearly made better by the fact that AT&T was able to offer the iPhone exclusively initially.
All right, Craig Moffett. Buffets. I know it's not food. Buffets. You go into a restaurant, you buy the buffet, all you can eat. A la carte pricing, that depends on what you decide to have. Is that going to be the legacy of the iPhone, not only for AT&T, but for Verizon? Everyone's going to pay more.
I think so. I think that the real lesson from the iPhone at AT&T was that if you give customers a flat rate pricing plan and say that it's $30 no matter how much you use, they'll use more than you ever anticipated. And remember, we're still at the front end of video over the internet and video over wireless and that sort of thing. Verizon, here's a great example. I saw just out of CES last week, there was an announcement about a company that has a new baby monitor app for your iPhone. Well, on Verizon's network, where there's unlimited usage caps, or at least that's what the Wall Street Journal has reported, that they will not be capping usage with the new iPhone. Why shouldn't I just set up my iPhone as a baby monitor and have the camera run all night? There are all and send all that traffic over Verizon's network. It's not costing me anything anyway. And the law of unintended consequences says that when you allow customers to use unlimited usage, they'll find an awful lot of creative ways to burn an awful lot of data.
All right, we're going to have to leave it there, but I want to thank you, gentlemen, very much. Craig Moffett, Sanford Bernstein, Rick Doherty, Envisioneering Group, and Roben Farzad of Bloomberg Businessweek, and our Julie Hyman coming to us from our markets desk, all about Verizon and the iPhone.